The courtroom was a pressure cooker, the air thick with anticipation and the sharp tang of fear. Representative Jasmine Crockett stood at the podium, her heart pounding like a war drum, her eyes blazing with a fire that could ignite a revolution. She had just uttered the words that would echo across headlines and social media feeds. "If I had the power, I'd lock up every corrupt politician, starting with myself if I ever strayed from the truth." The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. It was a bold, self-sacrificing declaration meant to underscore her commitment to justice, but it was also a spark that would ignite a wildfire she couldn't control. Across the room, John, a seasoned journalist with a nose for scandal and a heart full of grudges, scribbled furiously, his pen a weapon poised to strike. Jasmine Crockett, a rising star in Congress, had built her career on unapologetic honesty. Born in St. Louis to a preacher father and a postal worker mother, she'd clawed her way through systemic barriers, from Rhodes College to the University of Houston Law Center, to become a civil rights attorney and a fierce advocate for the marginalized. Her journey to Washington, D.C., was paved with sleepless nights defending the voiceless as a public defender and bold moves in the Texas House, where she broke records as the sole black freshman filing more bills than any newcomer. Now, in her second term representing Texas's 30th district, she was known for her viral clapbacks and her refusal to play by the old political rules. But that day in the courtroom, her words, meant to symbolize her integrity, were about to be twisted into a noose. John, the journalist, had been watching Jasmine for months. A grizzled veteran of the D.C. press corps, he'd seen politicians rise and fall, their promises crumbling under the weight of their own egos. John had a chip on his shoulder, born from years of being dismissed by the powerful, and Jasmine's fiery rhetoric made her a perfect target. He'd been digging into her past, chasing whispers of impropriety, unsubstantiated claims about campaign funds, a fired staffer's bitter accusations, a misinterpreted comment about her own hiring as a public defender. Nothing had stuck until now. Her courtroom declaration, meant to be a rhetorical flourish, was the opening he needed. By nightfall, his article hit the web. Jasmine Crockett threatens to jail herself in bizarre rent. Is she hiding something? The backlash was swift and merciless. Social media erupted, with hashtags like #JailJasmine trending within hours. Pundits on cable news dissected her words, spinning them into a confession of guilt. Why would an innocent person talk about jailing themselves? They sneered. Her supporters, fiercely loyal, flooded her Instagram with messages of encouragement, but the noise of the critics was louder. Jasmine sat in her Capitol Hill office, the glow of her laptop illuminating her face as she read the comments. Hypocrite. Dei hire. She's just an influencer, not a leader. Each word stung, not because they were true, but because they echoed the doubts she'd fought her whole life, doubts about whether a black woman from humble beginnings could ever be enough. Her aide, Maya, a young black woman who'd idolized Jasmine since her Texas House days, knocked softly on the door. "You okay, Congresswoman?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jasmine forced a smile, but her hands shook as she closed the laptop. "I thought I was doing the right thing, Maya. Calling out corruption, even if it meant pointing the finger at myself to prove a point. How did it turn into this?" Maya sat beside her, her own eyes glistening. "You spoke from the heart. People twist hearts all the time. But you've got us, your team, your district, your truth." Jasmine nodded, but the weight of the world felt heavier than ever. She knew she had to fight back, but how do you fight a narrative that's already taken root? John, meanwhile, was reveling in the chaos. His article had gone viral, his inbox flooded with interview requests. But beneath the triumph, a nagging guilt gnawed at him. He'd taken Jasmine's words out of context, knowing they were a passionate plea for accountability, not an admission of wrongdoing. Years ago, John had been a different kind of journalist, one who sought truth, not clicks. A personal loss, his sister's death in a system that failed her, had hardened him, turned him cynical. He saw Jasmine's rise, her unfiltered style, as a mockery of the serious work he'd once believed in. But as he watched the fallout, saw the pain in her eyes during a televised interview, he wondered if he'd gone too far. Jasmine's team scrambled to control the damage. They organized a press conference, but Jasmine refused to play defense. "I'm not here to apologize for speaking truth," she declared to the cameras, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. I said I'd jail myself if I ever betrayed my people because I hold myself to the same standard I hold everyone else. That's not a confession, it's a promise. The crowd was split. Some cheered, others heckled. John was there, in the back, his notepad untouched. Her words hit him like a punch. He remembered his sister's faith in justice, how she'd believed in people like Jasmine before the system chewed her up. The turning point came when Maya uncovered a lead. A former colleague of John's, now retired, reached out with a tip. John had been sitting on a bigger story, one about a corrupt lobbying firm with ties to several politicians, but he'd buried it to chase the Crockett scandal. Maya handed Jasmine the evidence, emails, financial records, a trail of influence peddling that could shake Washington. This is it, Maya said. This is how you turn it around. Jasmine hesitated. Exposing the lobbying firm would clear her name, but it would also mean dragging others into the spotlight, some of whom were allies. She thought of her father's sermons about doing right, no matter the cost, and made her decision. Jasmine went public, not with a press conference, but with a live stream from her district in Dallas. Standing in a community center surrounded by her constituents, teachers, nurses, single mothers, she laid out the evidence. This isn't about me, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. It's about a system that lets the powerful skate while the rest of us fight for scraps. I said I'd jail myself if I ever joined that system, and I meant it. But today, I'm calling out the real culprits. She named names, showed documents, and demanded accountability. The video racked up millions of views, her supporters rallying with #TruthWithJasmine. John watched the live stream from his apartment, his heart sinking. The lobbying story was his, one he'd abandoned when bitterness took over. He saw the comments pouring in, people praising Jasmine's courage, calling her a hero. For the first time in years, he felt shame. He sat at his desk and wrote a new article, not for clicks, but for redemption. I was wrong about Jasmine Crockett, he titled it. He admitted to twisting her words, revealed the lobbying story's origins, and apologized. She's not perfect, he wrote, but she's fighting for something bigger than herself. I forgot what that looked like. The article didn't go viral, but it reached the right people, those who doubted Jasmine, those who needed to hear her truth. The scandal didn't vanish overnight. Investigations into the lobbying firm began, and Jasmine faced new enemies in Washington. But her district stood by her, their faith unshaken. At a town hall, an elderly woman approached her, tears in her eyes. You remind me of my daughter, she said. She fought for what was right, and they tried to break her too. Don't stop. Jasmine hugged her, promising she wouldn't. Back in D.C., she walked into the oversight committee with her head high, her nails still painted with, resist. She'd lost the ranking member race, but she'd gained something more, a renewed sense of purpose. John, too, found a piece of himself he'd lost. He started writing again, not for headlines, but for the truth. He and Jasmine never spoke, but he followed her work, quietly rooting for her. The firestorm had tested them both, revealing their flaws and their strengths. For Jasmine, it was a reminder that truth is a weapon, sharp and dangerous, but worth wielding. For her supporters, it was proof that one voice, even in a sea of noise, could rise above. As the dust settled, Jasmine stood on the steps of the Capitol, looking out at the city that had tried to break her. She thought of her father's words, God puts you where you're needed. She smiled, knowing she was exactly where she belonged, fighting, unapologetically, for a world that could be better. And in that moment, she knew the fight was far from over, but she was ready.